so busy all day, all afternoon with a few home-related issues that I didn't even look up at the news. I wasn't on the internet or anything. So when my wife came home, she's like, "Did you hear what happened in Washington today?" And I was like, "No, what happened?" "Oh, the rioting. They stormed the Capitol building." And my first response was, "Oh, well, so that's no surprise to me. There's been a whole bunch of radicalized people who've been talking about doing that recently, so they finally did it." And then, of course, when I watch the news and been watching the news and stuff, after my nap today, I didn't get much sleep this evening. The anger has been taken over and stuff, but I'm going to try and refrain from being angry about the situation. The anger doesn't help. It clouds your thinking. I just know that I am not the world's highest IQ person. I'm not an expert really on anything. I haven't done a lot of academic work or studied things. In other words, I'm just kind of an average person. And I'm an average person who kind of likes and has an interest in history. And by looking at history, you really can see where things are going. So there's a lot of people coming out right now and saying what happened today was actually an attempted coup, an attempted takeover of the government by an illegitimate force, non-elected entity. It was led by the President of the United States. He stood up clearly and called for his followers to go march on the Capitol building and take over the Capitol building. That can be heard. So he started this riot. And a lot of these people clearly were intent on changing the government to fit their way illegitimately. So this essentially is an attempted coup that happened in the United States today. It's a lot like it's Pearl Harbor Day. A date which will live in infamy. So what happens after unsuccessful coup attempts? Well, over and over and over again, look back on history. After an unsuccessful coup comes the purge. And I think that's what's about to happen. I think that President Trump, I will be surprised if he doesn't end up in jail. And I won't just stop at him. My only hope is getting back to the anger issues and how anger and fear and all these heavy set emotions don't really help in this situation. I hope that common sense can take over in a lot of people's minds and hearts, and we are rational. We do what needs to be done, but we do what's appropriate to be done. And I don't know what that is. Again, average Joe here. The emotional side of me has some pretty good suggestions, but they're not really good. They're just based off of emotion. For anybody who may see or hear this personal reaction, I hope that in your lives and in your homes, you just take a breath, calm down, understand this is an area of history this country has never, ever crossed. Well, Civil War comes to mind. And there's been talk of people wanting a second Civil War, but people don't really want a second Civil War. A second Civil War would be disastrous, especially for those who started. Look at the American Civil War and the people who started it. Go visit Charleston, South Carolina, and understand that Charleston, South Carolina, for nearly 100 years, became a complete backwater, a forgotten area of the United States, because Charleston, South Carolina was the heart of the secessionist movement, twice in American history. Now, there's been talks of that kind of thing. Ironically, the War of 1812 was one of the first times, and the War of 1812, the states that wanted to secede from the Union were actually the Northeast states who didn't want the war. But Charleston, South Carolina, if you look back in history, has had twice where it has tried to push the state of South Carolina being an independent state. And it's funny that Charleston is the home of Stephen Colbert, of all people, and it's also a very beautiful place. I would love to live there, actually. Because the Charleston of today is not the Charleston of yesteryear. I'm not singling out a city or a region or anything just because of its checkered history. But I am saying that for a long period of time after the Civil War, Charleston, South Carolina was a very depressed area because it became a political pariah in this country. As a matter of fact, the city almost disappeared, which would have been a shame because it is a very beautiful and historic city. But one of the people who was a hardcore pro-Confederate, hate the Union, what was his name? Ruffin? He was from Charleston, and he was standing. As a matter of fact, he fired the very first shot of the Civil War with a pistol. He was so proud of it. He did not survive the Civil War. Many members of his family did not survive the Civil War. So when people think, it would be glorious, well, I guess if death and suicide are glorious to you, otherwise we have this system we put in place in this country, a political system, which is very frustrating and infuriating to deal with, but the funny thing about politics is it's the idea of people talking and trying to work together rather than trying to kill each other. Because if we do that, nobody would have anything. And throughout human history, we've tried that experiment too, where it was just the biggest strong man survives, and nobody likes that system. Most 99.99% of us would pretty much end up in a form of slavery with empty stomachs and children who would be lucky to survive their first 5 years. So we've come up with a system of government where we can work things out and talk system of government and make it better and not get so pissed off when our person doesn't win this time around. Because there'll be a next time around and a next time around. Matter of fact, we say that the United States is divided. That's actually kind of hyperbole. We're not necessarily divided. We are we keep swinging back and forth, but we're within a tolerance of maybe about 10%, if that. I think it's closer to 3%. 3% difference between political viewpoints in this country. We just swing back and forth. And that's the way the founding fathers actually envisioned it. That we would be somewhere in the middle. We would swing left, we would swing right, we would swing back left, we would swing back right. Because that's the way history works. That's the way time works. It's like a pendulum. It's not the end of the world if your side doesn't win this time around. Just get your... and maybe you'll win. People and talk to people and find out what makes people have an opposing viewpoint from you and empathize with it. I am convinced that part of the issue here is that there are people who are convinced that they know what God wants, and they're working hard. Well, we all know where that leads, and it doesn't lead anywhere good. You know, we've been teaching our kids. There's two things that we do to try to balance ourselves: prayer and meditation. Prayer is when we petition God, when we ask God, if it's all right with you, this is what I would like to have happen. Meditation is where we listen to God, where we tune out everything, tune out our minds especially, and try and become one with... Now, I wish I could meditate, but I'm not very good at it. But I do know the importance of at least acknowledging both things. And it is so easy to become convinced that we know what is right and what is wrong, and black and white, and positive and negative, and be completely... Radicalization is not far off. The next thing you know, we're contemplating doing away with anybody who has a different opinion from ours, whether that means excommunicating people in our lives that we don't like, don't agree with, or whether that means going to the worst step and trying to murder people who we don't agree with. It's all the same. You know, it happens every day. People contemplate violence when they have run out of arguments, run out of things to say. And there's really... So there's something I am sure of. What happened today in Washington was nothing short of treason. It was an attack on our nation, on our government, on our ideals, on our beliefs. It was fomented by a man who doesn't seem to be mentally competent. And it was carried out by followers who seem to be people who with and supported the president in the past. But now it's time for them to step back and go, okay, I supported him to a point, but treason is nothing I will ever support, and I'm stepping back from that, and I'm looking for something better. Maybe something that will fit what I believe without the treason part. And as of when I left, there are some very respected, reasonable people, including members of the president's cabinet, apparently, are talking about evoking the 25th Amendment, which will remove him from office, or they are talking about impeachment, which at this stage is only done to make sure that he doesn't try to get back into office. There is also a lot of calls for arresting and trying many of the identified leaders of the coup attempt and charging them with sedition, possibly treason, which in times of war carries a death sentence. We're not in a war, and historically we haven't executed people who've been convicted of spying, treason, or anything else of the sort. As a matter of fact, during the Civil War, many of the rebel soldiers and even their leadership, their generals, were paroled eventually, and some of them even regained full citizenship and were able to participate in the political process. One famous person that I know of, sorry, I had to drink, was General Longstreet, who eventually joined the Republican Party. And it was funny. He joined the Republican Party and was considered a traitor by his fellow Southerners, who at the time actually hated the Republican Party. And many people don't realize that at that time, up until the 1960s in the United States, you had the Republican Party, and then you had the two branches of the Democratic Party. The more liberal branch, based in larger cities up north and out west, like California. And you had the southern, hardcore conservative branch. And when the Republicans decided to appeal to that southern, and they defected en masse, first for Nixon and then for Ronald Reagan, this became the core of the Republican Party that we know of today. And I've often said that our president and many of these Republicans are actually neo-Confederates. They support many of the ideas and ideals of the neo-Confederate movement, which many people don't realize there is such a thing, but yes, there is. Well, anyway, I've talked till I've lost my voice, so I got to end this because my day begins.